A British website is openly advertising virgin Muslim brides here in Britain, and the details are going to make your toes curl. This sick and twisted website, aimed at mostly Muslim men, doesn't just promote polygamy, which is of course illegal in Britain. It openly advises men on how to strike their wives for disobedience, citing Islamic religious scripture as the justification. There are multiple videos on this platform detailing about what I'm going to share with you, but I have decided not to air them, simply because they are just too vulgar. This website is offering men the chance to find shy, untouched women under 35 as first wives. So, if you're not a virgin, if you're divorced, if you're over 35, you're branded low quality. Your only hope, they say, is to share a husband. Well, the website also provides advice to these men on how to avoid registering marriages, dodging the law, and denying women their rights. In my very strong opinion, this isn't just misogyny. It's religious misogyny, dressed up as tradition and marketed as core Islamic values. It is an attack on women's dignity, British values, and clearly the rule of law in this country. Now, as if that wasn't enough, bombshell revelations of the levels of child rape gang abuse in London is claimed to be more catastrophic than anywhere else in the country. Those are comments made by a care sector activist and abuse survivor to the BBC. Well, the Met Police record nearly 3 instances of child abuse for every 1,000 children. But local authorities flag far fewer cases. And that suggests to me many, many more cases are totally missed. With data collated by GB News' Charlie Peters, we know rape gang hotspots across London, such as Newham, are connected to other rape gang networks spanning the length of England. It'll come as no surprise to you that Newham itself has also seen some of the highest levels of migration from South Asia into the UK. But why do you really think these crimes have gone under the radar for so long?
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for what's a misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
How much clearer, hey? Blind and willful ignorance by the authorities, in my strong opinion, and I'd go as far to agree with the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, who also suggests there have been serious cover-ups. For too long, and far too often, under the banner of tolerance and diversity, we've allowed parallel societies to breed underground. Societies that do not have a place in Britain. Societies that degrade women and undermine hard-fought equality for women in this country. And I want to be crystal clear about this. The vast majority of Muslim and South Asian men in this country do not partake in these abhorrent activities. It is, as ever, a small minority of twisted and radical individuals. But if we are to tackle this issue and squash it, we need to do so without fear. And more importantly, we need louder voices in the Muslim and South Asian communities who are willing to speak up and stand up against it. There's not enough of them. I believe these 2 stories I've presented to you tonight are explicitly linked. Linked by mass migration, linked by a fear to address the root cause in the rise of misogyny, linked in the rise in abuse of women, and linked to child rape gangs. How much longer will the British public walk on eggshells before this crisis reaches a boiling point? Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel on this. Businessman and activist Adam Brooks, political commentator Chloe Dobbs, and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Bill, I'd like to start with you on this. This issue, particularly, of course, of grooming gangs, which we speak about a lot here, has been going on for decades. The government have finally caved in and given us a national grooming gang inquiry, which I welcome. But when we look at things like this website that has been revealed, The Telegraph revealed it the other day, does it not expose this parallel society of a small, radical group of people in the country that we need to start tackling more openly?
Well, I mean, the website and what it's trying to do is shocking, sickening, and it turns my stomach. It's talking about seeking out virgins, it's talking about polygamy, it's advocating domestic violence, and it's utterly unacceptable. On the website, they've got a disgraced medic who's been suspended because of anti-Semitism, but he's presenting himself as a registered medic. That's a criminal offence, and the police should investigate it. And also, polygamy is an illegal offence in this country. So both the website and those who partake of it should be sought out criminally. But the other thing is, and I do take your point, that we need Muslim faith leaders to speak out on this issue. I went on the website this afternoon, and I knew it to be the case. There are many, many Islamic scholars who rightly interpret the Quran as stating that men and women are absolutely and unequivocally equal. And we need more Muslim community leaders and more Islamic faith leaders to assert that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Adam, this is, in my opinion, reaching a boiling point. There is a lot of tension in this country, particularly around the topic of Islam, and I think that's coming up more and more regularly. My problem with it is I don't see enough leadership. I don't see enough leadership from the South Asian community, and I don't see enough leadership from, as Bill was saying, we just need more from the Islamic community as well.
It's funny, Alex. I speak out about the church a lot. I'm an atheist. Religion means nothing to me. I respect your right to whatever you believe in, whatever Bill believes in, and whatever these Muslim communities believe in. But when it goes against our fundamentals and our morals in this country, there's a problem. Now, when I speak out about the church, I'm never called Christianophobic.
Sure.
Yeah, if now I'm going to call this out, there will be people that say you're Islamophobic. And that is the problem. People are scared to speak out. But the big problem with the Muslim community that I see from the outside is when these heinous crimes happen, people want to cover it up. And even when they are convicted, come out of prison, they are welcomed back with open arms. How is that so? If I knew someone that was a paedophile, I'd want to do other things to him, but when they come out of prison, I would never speak to that person again, or be careful what I say, I would make their life hell. They would be nowhere near my community. And I think most dads are like that. Why do these communities welcome these monsters back in? Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think, to build on that a little bit there, I mean, we saw when some of the grooming gang perpetrators went down in court, we saw some of the family members there sort of up in arms about the ruling. Do we need to have a serious conversation with potentially immigrants who've come to the country or families of immigrants and say, particularly from the Islamic community, particularly from the South Asian community, because this links back, as I was saying, I think it's all linked. Do we need to have a more open conversation about the issues that are arising from these communities in the country?
Yeah, I think it shouldn't just be people like us talking up about these issues. And I think that it's far better if you've got leaders in the Muslim community, or in the case of grooming gangs, also in the Pakistani community, having the guts to stand up and say this is completely unacceptable. And that will help dispel the myth that when people talk about grooming gangs, we're referring to every single Pakistani Muslim man in the country, which we're not. But if they had the leadership and stood up and showed we're not going to tolerate this in our community, that would be very effective. I say sunlight is the best disinfectant, typically, when it comes to free speech, but that requires communities to actually give people consequences who have completely backwards views. I mean, one point that I've heard Charlie make is that what often happens in these Pakistani communities when it comes to the grooming gangs is that they're so close-knit that when people get out of prison, say they've been in there for only 2 years for the horrendous crimes that they've committed, they're welcomed back with open arms. Which I find very, very strange. It's often one thing people say is a strength of Islam is that they have a very strong focus on, community and friendship, but there's a limit to that.
I've got a good friend from the boxing community that is a practicing Muslim and really believes in his faith. And he says to me, Adam, there are people coming from other countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, where he's from, that are from areas where they never see women or girls, and especially not dressed like they are here. And he says, these people are coming over and they are interpreting 2,000-odd-year-old religious text like it is today.
Yeah.
So they're taking justification and an excuse from what they read in the Quran to go and do these heinous crimes. He says, Adam, we do not want that in our community. These people are extremists.
Yeah.
But again, more people like my friend need to speak out.
Yeah.
And say, you can't come here and you can't do that. The police have pleaded with asylum seekers a few weeks ago not to sexually assault our women and children. Where have we become in this country? You know, I've got 2 daughters. If I was to tackle one of those asylum seekers, I'd end up in prison.
I think you might be right there.
They are coming here and targeting our women and children.
But let's give this some context. We do need Muslim community leaders to speak up on these issues. But as you said in your opening, Alex, the vast, vast majority of Muslims do not sign up to this kind of abhorrent extremism.
Agreed.
And when we talk about polygamy, which is one element of this hateful website, you know, the figures globally are less than 1% of Muslims practice polygamy. And I think the figure's even lower within the UK.
Yeah.
But we need to mobilise that law-abiding, respectful, vast majority against this.
I just want to stick with you on this for a second, Bill, because I think you're right, and this is important because Islamophobia laws will, I think, be probably brought out during this Parliament. It's yet to be seen. I know we've heard them discussed quite often. Would a law like Islamophobia laws prevent us from having a conversation like this? Would what we're talking about tonight be deemed Islamophobic?
I don't think it would, but I'm not in favour of those Islamophobia laws. You know, I think in this country you have a right to adhere to your religion, but people have a right to criticise, and if they want to ridicule that religion. And I think that's one of the tenets of a free society and free and open debate, and we have to protect it.
Totally agree. Chloe, do you think that because of this crisis, particularly here in London, we've seen a failure of authorities, a failure of politicians? We go back to that grooming gang crisis, those comments today that the levels could be catastrophic in London. Is that a failure of leaders in the city of London to actually point this out and go, this is happening on our streets, this is happening? Councillors, politicians, local community leaders, they must have known this was going on. And we're only, and as these activists are saying, we're getting a tiny, tiny number of them coming through.
I mean, that conversation that you've played between Sadiq Khan and Susan Hall, I think just goes to show that we've got a complete failure of leadership. I think that you've got people like Sadiq Khan who don't want to talk about this because I think, A, they're in denial because it doesn't fit their view of the multiculturalism success story, but also they don't want to cause tensions in certain communities and lose votes.
Yeah, I think that'll be a very interesting to see how that plays out with the new Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana party, to see if that sort of perpetuates the problem.